One of you guys sent me this. Oliver Darko said, game journalist Jason Schreier talks about political infighting within Xbox and highlights how Microsoft attributes imaginary revenue, so-called member-weighted value, to first-party studios. More Game Pass playtime means better P&L sheet for the studios.
Remember at the beginning of this how I mentioned that Microsoft is this big, complicated organization with a lot of different tentacles, a lot of people who have different goals and kind of their own like objectives that sometimes are in conflict with one another. That becomes even more pronounced at this point. You have, even within the Xbox org, you have a lot of political fights, a lot of people who are at odds with one another, who are not on the same page. It is messy. The last couple of years at Xbox have been quite messy.
Well, and this, I mean, we can confirm that because there were reports that came out after Sarah Bond was not promoted, where she was saying, well, apparently, allegedly, Sarah, it was her way or the highway. So her big push was the everything is an Xbox thing. That was what she was in charge of. Clearly, it started with Phil Spencer, but then he hired her to front run that. So, you know, they both kind of were behind it. But that was her baby. And she was the one that did the recent marketing campaign to push that narrative that ended up being so disastrous for them. Where, you know, it was just a picture of a TV and it said, this is an Xbox. And so it turned into a meme, a joke, where people would have a loaf of bread and be like, this is an Xbox, you know. It turned into a joke, which is never what you want when you're trying to like sell something and people think it's a joke. But I think, yeah, your mom is an Xbox. Exactly. I think that this is very much true. There was clearly a lot of infighting, and Asha, to her credit, when she came in, it seems like she revitalized a lot of the energy in the company for a little while. And that she came in and seemed to unify everybody over the clear vision of, let's get back to basics. Let's get back to what made Xbox special, renegade spirit or whatever she called it, capitalize everything. New logo. Like, she came in and was like, we're going to try to all get on the same page so that we're all one unique and congruent fighting force to push the brand forward, which helps. Because I think within Xbox, you had the old guard who wanted Xbox of the 360 era back. And then you had like the Phil Spencer types. And Phil, I think to his credit, while the numbers speak for themselves, I think he was, financially at least, a bad CEO for Xbox. Like, clearly he kind of ran it into the ground. Exact reasons for that are more complicated than just his individual decisions, but clearly he had a vision and the vision didn't work. But his vision, to his credit, was, I think, make Xbox the definitive place to play games, make it open for everybody, make it the most affordable place to play games. And he also had this noble goal of having artsy studios like a Compulsion or Ninja Theory or Double Fine that are not making big commercial smash hits that would sell well anyways. Pentiment is like a great example of a game that wouldn't be greenlit normally that ended up being fantastic. But he wanted those games to basically be paid for by the amazing success of the big guys above them. So like you get Call of Duty that pays for Pentiment because it makes so much money. You can then fill out the catalog with the more niche stuff, the more artsy stuff that can't financially stand on its own. And that was a cool idea. Turns out that works until Call of Duty has a bad year, and then everything goes belly up, right? Like if Call of Duty has a bad year, nothing made money, you lose a ton of money because the sort of stimulus only comes from one entity or two entities at the very, very top. And if they struggle, or if the market in general struggles, everything sinks like a rock. It's like having, you know, instead of you're in the ocean, and instead of having 1,000 ping pong balls that are all buoyant, they don't individually have a lot of buoyancy. They can barely keep themselves afloat, but overall, I mean, they'll do the job, especially working together. The entire thing will stay afloat. What Microsoft did is they just had a bundle of rocks tied to a life preserver, and it stayed afloat. But the second that the buoyancy of the life preserver starts to lose itself or lose some air in it or whatever, it's going to sink to the bottom real quick, because everything else is pulling it down. And so it was a noble idea, but it didn't really work. So you have Phil Spencer's team there. And then Sarah, I think Sarah is a very motivated person. Sarah pretty clearly desperately wanted to be in charge of Xbox. I think it was clear she was being groomed to become the CEO of Xbox after Phil. And I think that was the plan for years. There was reporting that behind the scenes, she was basically being told, if you can get this Activision Blizzard deal through regulators and get it closed, you basically earned your spot as the next head of Xbox. And she did it, to her credit. She did it. And, but then her pet project, her baby, was this everything's an Xbox, which was one of the most disastrous things ever. I do think that like the price hikes, I don't think were purely like Phil's decision or Sarah's decision. I think it's pretty clear the price hikes that happened, pushing Outer Worlds 2 to $80, raising the price of Game Pass by double. I think that was probably that Satya Nadella was like, we need to start making money. Get on it. Phil was like, we're going to lose subs if we do that. Satya was like, show me. And they did it and lost millions of subscriptions. And that's just kind of how it happens. But I think that it's pretty clear. They definitely had multiple factions broken out within Xbox, and they only really unified under Asha, but then Asha again came out, and now they're doing tons of layoffs. And I don't know if they're still unified, but this is why I've said, if you're going to do the mass layoffs, rip it off like a Band-Aid and then focus on rebuilding the team. You can't keep doing this like every 6 months, there's another wave of layoffs and everything sucks again. Because this constant like, everything's great, you're all fired. Everything's great, you're all fired. You can't create a healthy environment. Like Microsoft tries to run their gaming division the same way they run like their software engineering divisions, which like my dad has been a project manager for. It's very clear, like their modus operandi is like, okay, we bring you guys in, you do this project, okay, we're going to lay you guys off, and then we're going to hire you as a contractor, and then after that your contract expires, you move to a different company, we'll hire that company now. They just kind of burn and churn. That's just how they operate. And you can do that with software engineers who are doing like security updates for Windows, or who are working on firmware for some niche device. You can do that and it's not that big of a deal. When you're trying to create like an art house project that takes 5 years to make, you can't do that. You need stability. You just do. And Microsoft seems to just fundamentally misunderstand that. And so they constantly do this thing where they get people excited. Oh, we're finally coming out of the tunnel. And then they're like, no, actually, you're all fired. Like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
People start openly questioning Game Pass and talking about how it cannibalizes their sales. And my colleague Cecilia D'Anastasio at Bloomberg has reported on the huge numbers that are estimated, hundreds of millions that were estimated to have been lost on Call of Duty by putting that on Game Pass, because when you put a game on Game Pass, you are losing a lot of money as a result, even though you are like, again, like I said, different orgs have different, within the organization, different groups have kind of competing goals. And so what might be really good for the Game Pass folks and for subscriptions there might not be so good for individual studios and the revenue brought in from individual games. By the way, just a little quick side note is that like the way the accounting works at Xbox is that you have if you're a game studio, you have your P&L, and the org actually attributes a certain amount within that P&L as like revenue, imagined revenue essentially, for what you for like the number of hours that people are playing your game on Game Pass. I believe they call it member weighted value is the term that they use. Microsoft has a lot of funny terms.
Basically, you have a bucket of money that's everybody's subscriptions from Game Pass. And then your studio gets paid out a chunk, like certain handfuls of that bucket based on how many hours. This is what I've been telling you guys for like years at this point, is that the money that what determines for Xbox a successful game is the number of hours played. So a game like Hellblade 2, where even if you play the whole thing, you only got 4 hours of gameplay time out of somebody, that is not a very financially viable product compared to like a live service game, or compared to a massive RPG, or a game that just has constant busy work, dynamic systems for replay, constant new game plus, like Starfield, to its credit, this is why I've said for a long time, I don't think Microsoft considers Starfield a failure, even though a lot of people were disappointed by it. Starfield, according to the data we have, was successful in terms of hours played. The average hours played were very high. The people who played it played an ungodly amount of it. A lot of people fell off of it, but I mean, they still put in a good chunk of hours to it. In many ways, Starfield was built and optimized for Game Pass, and not many games are nowadays, and that's probably why some people fell off of it so hard. It also makes me wonder about Elder Scrolls 6's design decisions, because if you're trying to build, if you're Todd Howard and you're like, I really want a boat, but boats are expensive. But if Elder Scrolls 6 can have an average player time of like 80 hours, I can afford the biggest boat in the marina. So how do we inflate gameplay hours? How do we get people to spend more time in the game? And then you start to see how all of these design decisions break down. Exactly. Boat math. Exactly. Exactly.
Instead of profit margin, they call it accountability margin. And the big number there was 30%, as I've reported on Bloomberg with my colleague Dina Bass. And so on your P&L, on your profit.
So the 30% accountability margin, this is where the nitpicking happened. They reported at Bloomberg that there was a 30% accountability margin requirement from Satya Nadella and Amy Hood, like the head honchos, the CFO and CEO of Microsoft. Microsoft spokespeople then later said, actually, our margin requirement is, we wouldn't say 30. It's like, yeah, because they call it accountability margin. They're like, technically, we don't have 30% margin requirements. And it's like, bitch, you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You know, you come on. This effectively it's margin, you know. I also find the term accountability margin really kind of like, what would the word be? Patronizing? I don't know. I find it like, we need to hold you guys accountable. This is your accountability margin from your accountability buddy. You know, I just find the term
and loss sheet, you might see a number that is like, hey, here's how much you would have made, or here's how much you are getting an attribution in revenue from being on Game Pass. And people question that number, I think, because it's all just kind of funny math. So it gets a little bit messy. And again, expectations are not 100% clear. A lot of people are just kind of unhappy with the situation. People have different beliefs throughout the org as to whether Game Pass really cannibalizes sales or not.
And maybe this brings up the bigger question, like Game Pass as a platform. There are certain things that I think are absolutely true. I think it is absolutely true that subscription-based models in any form of media do fundamentally affect, often in negative ways, distribution of the product in a more traditional way. So if you have a movie that's going to streaming services a week into its run in theaters, that will affect sales. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. If there is a movie that just dropped, what's a big movie? The new Spider-Man movie's coming out. If that drops in theaters and then a week into its run, it is available on Disney Plus, that will affect sales at the theater. Duh. Like, of course it will. In the same vein, if it doesn't go to theaters, or if it goes to theaters, but day one, it's also available streaming, why would you go to the theater to buy it unless you want like the theater experience? But that's expensive. So especially if budgets are tight and you don't have a lot of money, you're probably going to go and just watch it on streaming. Like, it will affect your financial performance in the traditional format by bringing it over to streaming. And the whole idea of streaming and what makes that worth it is that you sign up and they keep you signed up so they get recurrent revenue. So if you went to the movie theater, they may only make 20, 30 bucks off of you. But if you sign up for a $10 a month subscription or a $15 a month subscription to Disney Plus, and then you keep that for 2, 3, 4 months, they're going to end up with more money than if you went to the theater. So it ends up being worth it. And they got you hooked with the one movie that you were interested in, and then they keep you subscribed forever. That's the basic premise of all of these subscription models, is that, like, yes, they'd make 70 bucks if you bought the game on Steam or on the Xbox store or whatever. But if they can get you on Game Pass, if they keep you subscribed for 4 months, plus they make more money. It's keeping people subscribed, though, that's the trickiest bit. This is the report that he referenced in that clip. Call of Duty cost $300 million in lost sales. This was from Windows Central. Report, Microsoft gave up $300 million in Call of Duty sales as a result of Game Pass. So by being on Game Pass, the report suggested from Bloomberg that they gave up more than $300 million in sales on console and PCs last year, according to one of the former employees who asked not to be identified, discussing internal estimates. So Xbox's own estimates put the amount of money lost by putting it on Game Pass at $300 million. Now, you make that money back if you have $300 million worth of subscription revenue that you wouldn't have had otherwise, that is generated because those people signed up for Game Pass instead of buying it. But they have to keep their membership. They have to keep paying into it. And the other piece is, it's not pure profit when you sign up for Game Pass. Like, if you sign up for Game Pass for 15 bucks a month, 22 bucks a month, whatever it is, they're paying out to different studios based on what you're playing. So if you play Call of Duty, but then you also get hooked on Starfield and you put 100 hours into that, a big chunk of change goes out of your membership cost to, or membership dues, go to BGS, into their coffers, because of their accountability margin being good by counting the hours and all that. So there's been a serious question as to, for one, whether Game Pass is sustainable long term, and two, whether or not it's been good for the industry. And I think that those are two different questions, because of course, if you look at it one way where it's like, okay, it's the most affordable place to play games, assuming games go there when they're relatively new, maybe not day one, but within 6 months or something, you get a massive catalog for one fee. It does make this whole catalog of games more affordable to you. So that's really good, especially for people that are financially tight. And I think that that's good. But if it's not sustainable, that will change what the product is, and that will change, therefore, whether it's actually a good value, and then everything cascades from there. If it's not sustainable, it has to change, and the way it changes might make it so it's not actually that good of a value if it's only like, you know, slop games or whatever. I think it's pretty clear in its current form, it's not sustainable. I mean, they have 3% margin as a super mature business. That doesn't work. So clearly it's not working properly. So it needs major overhauls and redesigns. What does that look like? Well, clearly they think the requirement is to bring some stuff to be exclusive on the platform, to build up the platform and do it that way. I have a sneaking suspicion that Asha wants to wind down Game Pass. I think what she might do is stop bringing first party stuff there day one, because right now, what does Xbox need? They need more profit. They need more margin. You're not getting that through Game Pass. You're going to get that through day one sales at full price. So I think she's going to slowly start to try and announce that, like, hey, these games are no longer day one on Game Pass. I think these games are going to be maybe 6 months or a year after launch, they'll end up on Game Pass. And they need to be clear about what those expectations are. That's going to lead to fewer subscriptions. People are going to cancel their memberships, absolutely. But I think that that is a more clear way forward for them than what they've been doing. The other piece is Xbox has really struggled to make games feel like moments, like beats. Even big games like Doom, The Dark Ages kind of come and go very, very quickly. And it's like kind of surprising how just quickly they are you know, gone. Even like what are supposed to be really big games for them that they revealed recently are not doing insane numbers. Like Senua is one of their big tentpole franchises, artsy franchises, award-winning franchises. The trailer from the Xbox Showcase did 227,000 views. That's not particularly remarkable, especially you can compare it to the trailer for the second game. Like, look how, I'm guessing a lot of people fell off after the second game was so disappointing. 2.7 million from the original Game Awards 2019 reveal that was supposed to like showcase the Series X. On their own channels, it's like under 100K, 78K. Like they're not garnering the same level of attention that you would expect it to. And I think that part of that is just because, you know, Game Pass ends up being just this receptacle for a ton of different content, a ton of different little bitty games or big games, and then you just kind of tackle each and every single one whenever you get the chance. But it struggles to make games feel like big beats, marketing beats, which is a really difficult thing to change. You know, short game, short lifespan. Yeah, well, and it's also, in order to keep something like Game Pass interesting and engaging for people, you have to have pretty steady content drops. And so you have to have a lot of games coming out, which is why they bought so many studios. But by its very nature, when you have to release 20 games in a year into the platform, and you're trying to give each one a little marketing beat, 20 individual beats make each and every single one feel less dramatic. You know, if you have 20 little, it makes every single individual seem less profound and less significant. So overall, I just think like there's no easy way to deal with it. My suspicion is that Asha wants to try and pivot away from Game Pass, but Satya might be married to that idea because he really likes Game Pass. He likes subscription model revenue because it's regular. But I just don't know how that works. I mean, as analysts have said for a long time, Game Pass is one of those systems, just like streaming with Netflix and with everything else. It either eats the entire industry and becomes the standard, or it dies. Like, there's not really much middle ground because it doesn't seem like they can coexist very easily. And that's why there's a lot of brand confusion right now too, where it's like, okay, I can buy your game on Xbox's store, but then I can also get it through Game Pass, but I can only get it through Game Pass at this time, and I can also only get it in this edition. If I want the other edition, I have to pay another $35, and it gets really convoluted, you know, really convoluted. So anyway, I don't know what the long-term outlook is going to be like, but I think the most clear short-term thing is that Asha's gonna shut down studios, lay off a bunch of people, try to downsize. They're going to double down on the big franchises and try to make each of those a real beat and a real moment. And they also have to find a way to get people excited to buy games and to play games day one at full price. And that means probably longer marketing campaigns, more deep dive reveals, more marketing spend, and also probably, honestly, it means really reevaluating what it looks like on Game Pass. Because again, I think for them right now, the name of the game is just get money in the door. And you can get a lot more money in the door short term by selling like full copies as opposed to subscriptions. Subscriptions pay off after 4, 5, 6 months, not necessarily like day one, you know?
He took my thing. Red flag.